Hello, everyone. I would like to say hello to the participants of the meeting with artist and curator Aną Hoffner, Anką Leśniak, and Anamariją Batistą. I'm Stanisław Welbel. I am curator from Austrian Cultural Forum in Warsaw. I'm really looking forward for today's meeting. I'm really happy to meeting you in the virtual space of Austrian Cultural Forum. The meeting is taking place sometime before upcoming exhibition, which I'm also looking forward. It will happen soon in late spring, but already today I hope we will have a glimpse into what we will see in the exhibition, and I guess and I hope we will have an interesting discussion. If you feel like taking part in the discussion, please leave comments on Facebook, and I will bring your questions to the Zoom event, and I will ask them in the name of participants who are watching it on Facebook Live. Today's guest is Aną Hoffner, who is an artist based in Austria, PhD. Aną Hoffner Fulowicz. Sorry, I didn't say the full name at the beginning. She's also a writer and researcher, and she holds PhD from Academy of Fine Arts in Vienna and New School in New York. Anką Leśniak is also a PhD holder. She also teaches at Fine Art Academy in Gdańsk. Both of them exhibited extensively, so I would not mention all the shows that they took part of. I just seen that Aną Hoffner is having an exhibition coming also this year in Kunsthalle in Vienna. I'm very much looking forward to that. I don't know, Anka, your plans, but so feel free to tell us more about it. And today's meeting is moderated by curator of upcoming exhibition at the Austrian Cultural Forum, and today's moderator, Anamariją Batistą, who is curator, researcher, also academic teacher, and currently she's in her PhD process at the Academy of Fine Arts in Vienna. And I will not take longer now our time, but just pass my voice to Anamariją Batistą, who will be moderating today's meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Stanislav, for the invitation today, and I'm very much looking forward to speak with Anką Leśniak and Aną Hoffner about the upcoming exhibitions, but more exactly about their works. We already had a few talks together, and we decided at the beginning of our talk we will show the parts of the video works. The one from Anką Leśniak, which is named The Witch, and the second one from the new video work of Aną Hoffner, which is titled by the name of a very famous Viennese inhabitant, Sigmund Freud. So I would like to ask you, Stanislav, just to show us these experts.
Okay, so I will start with Anką Leśniak's two accents. Okay. Yeah. Just a second. Okay, can you see?
Yes.
Yes.
So I'm playing.
Over and over I heard the words, "Unbelievable, that woman has made this." Suddenly the delegate from Künstler House called to me. "Place yourself quickly by your witch. The emperor just asked who made this. You should be introduced to His Majesty." The emperor asked me questions, smiling and talking for a full half hour. The next morning, the newspaper covered the witch at length. I was famous, although hardly 24 hours earlier I was almost driven out of the Künstler house. Stefan Zweig described my witch in the words: the wanton, expectant smile that dreams about diabolical orgies, the barely controllable sensuousness, a torrid, confusing, satanic mood, all embodied in a single figure.
Shall I also play a second clip now?
Yes, please.
Okay.
I will tell you when to stop, otherwise it gets too long.
No, there is from Anka, the second one, and your one is the third.
Afterwards.
Yes.
Actually, some of the things like this in the face looks totally like damage from the Second World War, from shrapnel, from grenades and everything. I mean, I can't tell you for sure, but the way it's dispersed in the face looks very typical. I find that the witch does not need anything reconstructed, but this is my personal opinion. I think it's a lovely sculpture that can speak also as it is now, so that you don't need the hand with the scissors to tell the story.
And now the clip of Anna.
Okay, I think this is a good moment to stop.
So thank you a lot.
Thank you.
What we have seen are the parts of the two works, The Witch and Freud. The women artists Theresa Ries and Freud were both the inhabitants of Vienna at the late 19th century and the beginning of the 20th century. What do they have in common? That they both emigrate in the 30s because of the new political circumstances. Anką Leśniak, you are actually in a way researching on the figure of Theresa Ries, but at the same time very much putting the question into the focus, what to do with the parts which are not there anymore of the sculpture. So you are discussing what we have seen in the second video, the question of the reconstruction. At the same time, the first part of the video where we heard about the empire who very much liked the sculpture of Theresa Ries, The Witch, which was exhibited at the end of the 19th century in Künstlerhaus in Vienna. And also the Gustav Klimt give her, I think, a kind of the support, and she became popular or famous over the night. My first question would be, what was the moment in your working practice, how your where your inspiration come from for this research topic? Why you have an interest into the witch and into the life of the Theresa Ries, actually?
Yes, when it was a few years ago, probably in 2015, when I was searching about the history of forgotten women, and it was connected with my previous artworks and artistic interest in searching of biographies of forgotten women, but also women who somehow didn't follow patriarchal patterns, and they didn't fit to this imagination of a woman as a passive creature and dependent on men or her husband. And in that time, I was watching websites, and I came across a book by American researcher, and it was a book about Viennese artists from the turn of 19th and 20th century. And the protagonists of this book were women artists from that time and Jewish artists. And so when I started to look into this book, I found a photo of the witch, and I found information about Theresa Ries, and the photo published in the book was an archive photo. Was a photo was an old photo, which was took before the war. And when I found this witch with scissors, who is holding a big scissor in her hands, I was really surprised, and the sculpture caught my eye, and I started to research more on it. And then I found the contemporary photos of this sculpture, and I noticed that something is lacking, and what the sculpture is missing is the hand with scissors. And that was the beginning of my research, because it's lacking part of a sculpture raised many questions about Teresa Ries herself, about the history of women artists and how they were treated in art history, and especially Jewish women artists, and also about why this hand disappeared and in which circumstances, because it could happen many times before the war, during the war, and also after the war. Mm-hmm. So the reasons, and this putting this question about the reasons were very, it was very inspiring for me.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Anna, Anka just spoke about the lack of a hand and of a foot. And as psychoanalyst Eduardo Weiss asked Sigmund Freud, to advise him what to do about a Slovene patient who is suffering from sexual impotence and who was not responding to his psychoanalytical therapy. Freud advised him, the second patient, the Slovene, is obviously not worth of your trouble. Our analytical art is powerless with these people, nor can our insight penetrate the dominant dynamic conditions of such cases. So what do Balkan people are lacking, and why they are not the one who can be actually treated by the methods of the psychoanalysis? Yeah, that would be my first question to you.
I still find this quote so funny. I have to laugh about it every time I read it. That Bosnians are anal and unanalyzable, and just this conceptualizing of something that is beyond the analytical, and defining psychoanalysis as something that is reserved for a particular kind of people and it's not applicable for anybody else. Yeah, so it helps me to build up an argument throughout the whole film, and that is that the Orientalism that we know from psychoanalysis, and this is quite researched and not just about the obvious carpet, but throughout psychoanalysis, that it does not in fact concern ancient Egypt or former times or any kind of ancient, but it concerns the very surrounding where Freud was embedded, which is the monarchy, which is parts of the Balkan, which is everything he had in front of his door, everything that was out there. But maybe to come back to the beginning of the film, I slowly introduce different protagonists, and one of them is the first Bosnian filmmaker. So the very beginning is footage about a travel from Kaiser Franz Josef in 1910, which was documented by an unknown producer. But right after that, in 1914, there is Antun Valic, who was filming the assassination of Franz Ferdinand, and who was only 21 at that time. So he was filming before and after, and because his family owned one of the first cinemas in Sarajevo, he could make a film, and he screened it already on 4th of July, which was only a few days after the assassination. So this is quite unknown that this footage was made by the first Bosnian filmmaker and cameraman, and that actually Bosnian cinematography starts very much with the First World War and with the downfall of the monarchy. So I wanted to have this in the beginning of my whole introduction. He sold his footage to a French film company called Eclair, which merged with the Austrian film company Sasha. So this is how it appears in the Film Archive of Austria as an Austrian and French production. And his name is only known to specialists, only people who research into film history. Anton Valic is someone, but actually this footage that became then quite known because it is documenting this historical event is not attributed to Bosnian film history. So maybe just the last thing to mention on that is that the German titles are quite important because since the beginning of showing film in Bosnia, everything was titled in German. And this was very affirmative of the fact that German was supposed to be the dominant language, but also it was followed by a lot of resistance. People didn't want it. People wanted film to be shown in Bosnian and Croatian, Serbian. And I also wanted to have this, this moment of the dominant German language, whereas why I showed the English translation of Freud right after. Yeah, so this is a little bit about this beginning assemblage.
Mm-hmm. So Anka, the Rizeris was not allowed actually to attend the Academy of Fine Arts at that specific moment, and before she came to Vienna, she was actually the student of the Moscow Academy of Fine Arts, but because of some kind of discipline reason, she has to left it. Do you know why? What did she do in Moscow that she had like to stop her education there?
The most facts we know about Teresa Ries, we get to know from her book. Like the title is Die Sprache des Steins. I hope I pronounce correctly. It's the language of stone in English. And in this book, she tells us that she challenges the authority of one of the professors in front of the classroom. Because as she reports, the professor was talking with mostly with male students, but not with her. And she told him, "You are here for us, and not we are here for you." And the next day, she got to know that she was expelled from the academy.
Mm-hmm. So then she came to Vienna and she found actually a private teacher, which was, I think that was a kind of normality that the teacher from the academy had their private students, also especially women students, which were not allowed to attend the academy. And it was also, can you tell us maybe a little bit about how she became this idea to make the witch? Because she's that also describing in her book. Yeah.
Yes, we should also pay attention on the language, how this book was written, because Teresa Ries builds her legend in this book, and she describes all the moments when she came up with the idea of doing a sculpture as a kind of revelation. And it was also in the case of the witch that she was at the academy, because she of course used the studios and models from the academy. And when she was walking down the stairs, she stumbled out on an old broom, and it was in the time when she was pretty tired with sculpting the busts and the copies of some ancient sculptures. And she wanted to find her own topic, her own subject in art. And so when she stumbled upon this old broom, she got a kind of revelation, like, yes, this is a great idea to make a a witch, like she associated it with witch's Sabbath and with Faust, and the Academy model who posed for this sculpture, her name was Anna Faust, and she connected together all these facts, and it was the inspiration for the witch. But we should also remember that witch was created in a very particular moment when Ries became or was becoming a mature artist. She was still pretty young, but already not a very beginner. And for me, it's like a kind of manifesto. It's her first mature work.
Mm-hmm. Anna, I just read that the Freud's patients, sagt man Patienten, patients, were especially because the fees were very high. So that was especially people coming from the upper class. My question is, why do you think that the Freud this moment where you don't know or you do not really practice with the people coming, I would say, from ex-Yugoslavia, maybe he would say from Balkan, but you are very much, actually you have already a kind of a meaning about them. That's what I'm really curious about this moment of the knowledge about something that you are not really have time to become familiar with it. This moment of this very specific conclusions that he has, and he made some kind of trips to Balkan, but that were not very long trips. So I know that you cannot really answer to this question by the facts, but I'm very curious about your opinion about that, about this phenomena of knowing about the things that you are not really experiencing actually, or are not part of your everyday work practice or life practice.
This is a question about what was common sense in the monarchy and right afterwards. And I think what is interesting to see is that somebody who did not avoid anti-Semitism at all, who did not avoid class distinctions, because Freud could become what he was only because of very recent changes for Jews in his surroundings. So his own family was, his own background was in a way made sure that he knew about very different layers of that society. So he was not just, one could not say this is an upper class doctor that invented psychoanalysis. But at the same time, something became very effective. And if we see this as a symptom, as Freud's own symptom, and undertake something like a symptomatic reading, then one can see this play of proximity and distance. And this maybe as the main signifier of Orientalism, making things come close and putting them on distance again. So what is allowed to come close and what is going to be pushed aside, and that this border was something that was negotiated constantly. So his own experience, or maybe his own knowledge on anti-Semitism, did not prevent him from thinking that there is an Oriental Bosnian outside. So this was just a ruling and governing strategy that was so inscribed that it could not be escaped, that it even traversed the unconscious of early psychoanalysis. And the reason why I wanted to go back to this and to have another look at the proximity and distance is that I think that it's still operating, and that it's not very popular to name it as such, but this shifting border is something that we face every day. And I would say one example is when, let's say, for instance, Croatians addressed as being white Europeans because they have entered the European Union, and this offer of taking part in Europeanness takes place when, let's say, Croatian policemen can push refugees back across the border. So this is when they execute their own position as white Europeans, right? So this is, the offer is given and they really perform this duty. But at the same time, when it comes to the coronavirus, it comes from the south and it comes from Croatia. So we see that this strategy of proximity and distance and of making a split goes for one subjectivity. So they can be the carriers of the virus coming from the south, and they can at the same time execute the racial violence on others. And I think this is the colonial strategy that operated in a particular moment, and that is really, it's not in a continuity. I think post-colonial theory was talking for a long time about the continuity, but I think it's a revival, it's a reinstallment of that this split within the subjectivity has to happen all the time. So at once you're white just to protect the border, but then you're the carrier of the virus from the south, crucially from the south. Yeah, so I don't know if that answers the question.
Thank you. Anka, can you recognize such kind of ambivalence also in the work or life of Theresa Rees and her specific position in the Viennese society?
Yes, maybe it's her attitude towards women. I mean that she was, what we can observe that she was not much connected with other women. Of course, she exhibited some women's exhibition, but when she couldn't study officially at the Academy of Fine Arts in Vienna, she didn't went to any art school for women. So she was not against women in the very open way. But from the other hand, she didn't feel like one of them. In fact, she don't mention much about her femininity, maybe at the beginning of her book, and she didn't so she didn't identify much with the fate of women. And she never mentioned about how hard is the physical work of being a sculptor. And I remember also one fragment of her book when she mentioned that a woman who was also a Russian came to her studio and started to confess her that she is pregnant and she was lost by a man who was the father of the child. And Teresa remembered this moment not like the moment when she felt sorry for these women, and she didn't feel any kind of compassion, but she started to observe this woman as a model. And from artistic point of view, that she realized that this woman expressed a kind of grief and sorrow, and could be it was an inspiration for her artworks, Eve. So this is very interesting that she was a woman, but from the other hand, she didn't identify with women.
Mm-hmm. Anna, you are combining actually the recordings of Freud Museum and this archive films showing Bosnia and Herzegovina with the films of Man Ray and in the third part, we have also another protagonist in your work, which is the journal, the avant-garde journal Zenit, actually. Could you tell us a little bit more why this, why you include those protagonists in this film? From my point of view, as I saw the film, I was thinking about these different perspectives on the question of that, what is uncivilized, or what is barbarism, or what is something what is not experienced, the symbolic authority of the father as and I had a feeling that Sigmund Freud was actually, for his time, he was also a kind of avant-garde in the field of the psychiatry or and psychology. And on the other hand, in the 20s, we have, but he has this very colonial view on the Balkan countries. And on the other hand, we have this journal of Zenit, which also from today's point of view was in a way very international and very open-minded to different kind of intellectual narratives. Could you tell us maybe more about that?
Mm-hmm. So the other footage that comes in after this introduction is taken from a film from 1925, and it looks incredibly like ethnographic material, like the veiled and the unveiled woman and the Jewish tinsmith and all the stereotypes. But in fact, this was done as as a road movie, as an early road movie after the fall of the Habsburg monarchy. So in 1925, already this politics of nostalgia, of reclaiming, of glorification, of going back to the colony starts. So this is very, very early. If I can come back again to proximity and distance. So we are used to talk about the glorification or maybe the nostalgia to the good old times when it comes to the 80s or when it comes to contemporary tourism. But this is in fact something that was politics from the very beginning. So the looking back and taking into possession through the gaze happened through a road movie which implemented its own ethnographic tools. And so this is the surrounding that does not really allow to say, to make a clear distinction that there was the monarchy and then there was a completely new order, because this, in a cultural memory, these things started to circulate. Mm-hmm. So it's Der Kilometerfresser. Unfortunately, I don't know the title, but the guy who is traveling through all the so-called crown lands, which I think should be simply renamed to colonies, because crown lands is not a too positive celebratory term and over-identifying with monarchism. So he travels through all the former crown lands, so that this film can be also shown as a traveling film. So it was going from one city to the other. Interestingly enough, this film was then lost, and it was only found in 2002. Okay. And I didn't find too much analytical writing about it, although I think it would be really necessary. So this is one another layer of archival footage that I use. And then the reason for to bring in this hidden avant-garde, the Zenit and Zenitism and the journal was simply a try for another feminist retrospective appropriation, let's say, similar to Anka, what you were doing with Theresa Ries, I think. I was hoping to find more women in Zenittism, or to find something that would give some hint to a less sexist avant-garde, but this is extremely hard to find. So I had to take bits and pieces, and on one hand put out there what was interesting to me, and this is the reformulation of barbarism, like the clash of civilization and the barbarians, and this over-identification of Zenittists with art, poetry, and barbarogenius, and confronted with a narrative that I create from my own perspective, where different footage comes in, where a different set of images comes in. So this avant-garde is kind of contesting the colonial travel. So I start from one travel and I go to another travel. Yeah.
And Anke, this question Anna just told about this moment of reconstruction or nostalgia that begins very early, already in the 20s, concerning the Austrian-Hungarian monarchy. If you think about this question of reconstruction in connection with the Teresa Ries sculpture, The Witch, you spoke with the two restaurators till now, which tell us more about their thoughts about the cause of how the sculpture was destroyed, and on the other hand, you asked them, would they reconstruct it, or would they put the hand with the scissor again or not? And they had, in a way, opposite meanings. Could you tell us more about that?
Yes, the question of reconstruction is interesting for me for a few years, and it started with my work, Top Models, when I tried to. When I started to ask me who were the models from the paintings of famous male artists, and I started to search for some stories of them, and mostly the conclusion was that they were the lovers of wives of the artists. So it was very patriarchal pattern, and from these little parts, I started to build their identity. And I mentioned here it's because maybe it was the first work when I started to work with the term of reconstruction, like a recreation, because we cannot say really what was in the past, but in this reconstruction, it's like building again. And here I try to reconstruct this hand of Teresa Ries sculpture in symbolical way. And why I was asking two restorers about the idea of reconstruction, because first I was curious what they are thinking about, and then to find the third solution. Because in my opinion, art is a field when this third solution for this 0-1 solution can be offered. And these two contradictory opinions showed that in the art restoration or the art renovation, the answer can be yes or not. So and for me, it's not enough and it's not sufficient. And maybe in the case of this sculpture, the question should be shifted to other discipline. Because for me, not reconstructing and just put the photos of these archival photos on the wall next to the sculpture, it's not enough, because such a strategy does not cause any questions, or it's very little chance that it may cause any questions in the public, in the audience. But if we decided to reconstruct, we will lose the history of the sculpture, and this lack of this missing part of the sculpture asks a lot of questions. So that's why I included the opinion of the renovators as the part of my artistic research and artistic investigation. And I also wanted to show that it's the collaboration or gathering the opinions or research results of people from different disciplines can be very useful in art.
Mm-hmm. And Anke, just one more question. Do you maybe know, as I was thinking about the images of the witch, why the Caesar actually? I know the broom as a element of the witch sculptures or figures, but I don't think that I have ever seen the Caesar.
Yeah, I was also researching on Caesars, and it turned out that it was one of the magic tool. It was used in some magical rituals, and maybe it's also the tradition of Caesars may also trace back to the ancient time and to the three faiths from ancient culture, and one of them cuts the thread of human's life. So maybe it is a kind of representation of a woman, of a witch, or maybe an ancient goddess who has power over the life, the birth and the death of a human being. But I don't know how much Teresa Aris was aware of this knowledge, because she in fact she doesn't tell much how about her research. But maybe it's possible that she could know some legends or old fairy tales, and maybe also from Russia, and it was an inspiration for her.
Mm-hmm. And Anna, in your work, you are filming an exhibition in a Freud museum. Could you maybe tell us a little bit more about this exhibition?
Yeah, this museum is currently under renovation. So this is the old version of it, which is the apartment of Freud. So this was maybe the last chance to see it like this from inside, and now I'm very happy that this was done at that moment. I don't know how the new museum will look like, but I think that it might fulfill its current role in the musealization of this city, honestly, because I think that another moment of reinstallment of the colonial is musealization, and maybe the coming back of something that can be compared to 19th century historicism. Because right now in Vienna, you can take a walk from one colonial building to the other, from one extremely dubious museum like the World Museum, which is the former ethnographic museum, to the other one. And this is, it's seamless. It's like you have a walk through the city from one stage setting of one museum to the next. And the Freud Museum used to be slightly different from that, because it was old and it was a little run down, and it was also full of tourists always, but we'll see how it's going to turn out in comparison to this whole landscape, to Künstlerhaus, which was renovated by Strabag, and now has the Albertina Modern Collection. So I think it was very very useful for my idea to go into the space of the musealization and this kind of external architectural, but also inner walk.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Thank you. So Stanislav, I think we can open up the podium for the.
I'm just checking if there are some comments on Facebook, but most of the people were just sending hi's and hellos. There was no any formal question, but actually it was like time now. I was thinking about few questions that emerged when I was listening to your talks. I would say it again, I'm really excited for the project to come to Warsaw and Austrian Cultural Forum. I think both of the inspiration for your work is so relevant today, and this particular moment in history, I think can learn us a lot. So, first question is to Anna. When I've seen your film, I had this. It brought to my mind the film "Statues Also Die" by Chris Marker. The way you filmed it, the way you showed like the artifacts in museum, which are like sort of like trophies from colonial era. So what I focused the most in your work was this aspect of colonialism that is here, and somehow that's why I connected to famous movie by Chris Marker, "Statues Also Die." You were intentionally doing it? You were making this comparison, or it's just me who brought it together?
I mean, it's unavoidable.
Mm-hmm.
There are so many artifacts, and actually not as many as in London, because the Viennese Museum does not hold the couch, for instance, but has many other pieces of Freud's personal collection. This is just unavoidable. Mm-hmm. And I'm very honored by this connection with the statues. The statues also die from Chris Marker. I didn't have it on my mind, but I think once you enter this space,
Yes, as you said, also the way of filming. I mean, the silence and just camera moves that just kind of witness what is inside. It's not explanatory, it just shows things.
I have to say that I have very different strategies, because
mm-hmm.
I wanted to use the superimposition of images of the actual, of the fresh shot, and the archival footage is something that interrupts, that they both interrupt each other. So this was something I wanted to work with, instead of having 2 channels, for instance, or instead of splitting up things, but really to mess it up in the way the collection is done. So this was supposed not to be a proper work, but really to perform what the archive of psychoanalysis did, and this is creating a big mess also, and trying to find a way out of it. Because for that time, that kind of archaeology that is then transferred to the psyche, was a completely radical method. This was something that turned things upside down in an incredible way, and maybe avant-garde film did that much more direct. I don't know if one could say that than it was done later, but I thought that silent film had a lot of this method of overlayering, than the editing that was so completely different than it is done now, that I'm kind of trying to mimic.
Talking about silent film, one more thing I notice is I think it's extremely important, and it and it's the fact that by working with these archival materials, you're in a way also decolonizing the archive. And as you said at the beginning, the author of this archival footage was unrecognized, and you're bringing that name to the consciousness. So I was curious, you said a little bit about like an institutional setup in Vienna, how the Freud Museum sets into the other museums and institutions which are like this, let's say, colonial like treasuries there. How is it with film and film institutions that you clearly worked with on that project? How is this memory of having the archives of this kind of footage that works? Did they also do other projects that are decolonizing this archive?
I think the whole topic of decolonization is extremely taken with a lot of resistance in Austria. It's very similar like the situation in Germany, where you have all these fights around the Humboldt Forum now. Mm-hmm. And there is a lot of activism going on, but people just don't get it. What is the problem? Because they still think Germany had no colonies. And I think in Austria, the problem is the same, that so many things are reinstalled. Like many things of common sense, many unconscious things are reinstalled, like the virus coming from the south, or the crown lands being just the crown lands and being just part of something that was good, mm-hmm. but completely eradicating class difference, completely eradicating exploitation, completely eradicating the differences that were there, that the whole east of the Habsburg Empire was used for agriculture, while industry developed only in a few cities, partly in Vienna, partly in Budapest. So all these things are kind of cut off. And that's why any kind of discourse on decolonization is taken as something that is imported from outside. So this is something that comes from these countries who had the real colonies and who were far away and on other continents, and but what we had in Austria, this is not even worth being called colonies. The same with presence and absence of Black people. There were, the research group on Black Austrian history was doing really essential work years ago. And this was taken up that was at least my impression about the reception of this work, that this was taken with a big surprise. Although it was about Mozart, it was about blackface in opera from 18th century, and Black people being part of this country for centuries, let's mm-hmm. say. So all this is facing like, I don't know if I can say incredible oblivion, but very little application. Yeah, so one would have to really redefine what is coloniality within Europe and what was it for these old empires, so that we can understand things such as Orientalism operating, creating Islamophobia, creating the other in front of your door, creating that it is not about geographical distance, that it never was. And yeah, this is shaping quite a lot the museum landscape.
It's absolutely fascinating, and I think it will be also extremely important to bring this discourses and discussions and topics to Warsaw, because this is European topics, and from some perspective they are kind of pushed to other places, and like we are not part of it, like in this way. But I think it should be kind of reconsidered in many places in Europe. I'm just checking Facebook in the same time. We have like around 30 people watching us, but no one is commenting us for now. So I will use this opportunity to ask one more question to Anka. I was absolutely fascinated when I've seen your works about the figure of Teresa Ries. I was I had an attack of reading. I was researching, finding information because I was not that familiar with that character. And I have seen there was an exhibition on her or a project in Jewish Museum in Vienna, and I managed to find a lot of information. But the question is more general: how much her figure and presence in this also particular time in Austrian history is common, is known? Is it like bringing kind of forgotten history, or is it kind of rethinking a very well-known story? How would you say?
It's not a very well-known story. In fact, the research of women artists and Jewish women artists who were active in Vienna before 1938 started in a very serious way, as far as I know, by Sabine Plackholm-Stuber. She's a professor at Viennese Technical University and maybe the university in Vienna, and she wrote the book in early 90s. And then, and in fact, she was the one who discovered the sculptures of Teresa Ries left outside of Vienna in the Oberla Garden, and they were very much damaged. There were red paint on all the sculptures and also on the face of the witch. And since the museum of the city of Vienna was responsible for these sculptures, she reported what happened to the museum, and the sculptures were taken to the museum store and has been renovated, and but still they are kept in the magazine, and they are shown from time to time at the exhibitions. And Teresa Ries, in fact, started to appear more in public consciousness, let's say, after the book I mentioned already the book, but now I tell the title. It's Memory Factory, but by Julie M. Johnson, because she wrote it in English. She had a scholarship in Vienna, and then she published the book in 2012. And 4 years later, there was an exhibition, you mentioned it, in Jewish Museum, and it was a big exhibition. And this was the first time when this sculpture drew the attention of wider public. And the second exhibition was in 2019. It was Stadtfrauen in Lower Belvedere, and this time Teresa Ries' painting was not the sculpture, but her painting was presented everywhere, even in the underground. Mm-hmm. But still, she was presented as one of the many artists. So I think that since now she has no there is no a book only on her, and I know that one thesis was written at the university, at the art history in Vienna, and I think that the people who are now researching on Teresa Ries in very intense way, it's me and another artist, Valerie Habsburg. So if we are talking about monarchy, maybe also Valerie is listening to us now. That's also an amazing story, because the person who gave the visibility to Teresa Ries was the Emperor Franz Joseph, and his great granddaughter is a person who's also, as you was somehow excited when she came across on the story of Teresa and her sculptures. And she started to research, but we didn't know about each other. And we met only in 2019 in Vienna. And it was a few months after Valerie bought the private archive of Teresa Ries. And this archive really sheds new light on some facts from her life. So we have something additional except her autobiography. But it's you ask also about my plans. So there will be 2 exhibitions this year in October in Vienna. But now I cannot give you more details. But Teresa Ries will be present on this exhibition, and also in Zubikao next year.
Exciting. I'm really looking forward. And as it is case in Anna, I'm really also excited to bring your work and show it in Austrian Cultural Forum, because I think it's also such an important topic, and like bringing out of this forgotten state a female and a Jewish as well artist from that era to recognition is important. So one can also just think about more or less the same times and Polish art scene where it was common that female artists will not be allowed to study at fine art academies, and the strategies that they will use. You were saying that she refused to go to this art academy only for women, so she had a private tutor. There were like stories of students who will cross-dress in order to be accepted to academy, and they will dress as men in order to be able to study. So those like stories of actually like a long-haired repression and will be particularly important, I think, to say, to show and to speak about it.
Yeah, thank you, Stanislav. Thank you, Anka and Anna, for these wonderful stories, which inspire me, give us a lot of inspiration to think about this specific time, where a lot of emancipatory processes in the field of society and politics and economy took part, but at the same time, to make a connections, what is, I think we can make, unfortunately, strong connections, or to recognize a kind of retrograde movements. Mm-hmm. Of the societies today. So both of your works are very complex, and that's something what makes them so interesting. And so you can think about the formal way how you construct a story, but then again, it gives such a great impulse to search, to make your own research, or to search further on the characters that you are somehow reflecting on, topics like art institutions, questions of colonialism, questions of women artists, questions of reconstruction. I really enjoyed it till now, but I think it's so great that we can speak more in Warsaw. End of the May, I think, will be our opening. Yeah. That's from my side. I think it's enough for today. I don't know if you agree. But...
I would, yes, of course. I was just checking if we have some questions, but actually we do not have comments. We have still people watching with us on live on Facebook, but as you said, it's a good moment to say thank you and say see you, I hope soon in Warsaw, and to leave some space for things to come up in Warsaw and on an exhibition, and then talk more. It's a teaser in a way for the upcoming exhibition, so we should leave some more space. Thank you very much. I enjoyed our conversation, and I'm really looking forward for the project to be presented in Austrian Cultural Forum in Warsaw. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, jetzt sind wir wieder.
Jetzt wir sind wieder nicht mehr auf Facebook Live.
So we are alone again.
This is
Yes.
so strange. This is so, I had no clue now who was there and